Greetings, friends. Welcome back to another episode of Dreamscapes. Today, we are very happy to welcome our friend Liz Lawson, the Reluctant Historian. You can find her on Instagram at the Reluctant Historian, along with her husband, Dakota, to whom I guess the object of the show is you're explaining things to him historically.
Yes, and he is a very reluctant historian.
How does that usually go? What are your conversations like?
So I'll just tell him some sort of story from history, something that I think is interesting and fascinating. I pretend he's one of my students, and I try to make it as interesting as I can. And he just tells jokes whenever he's bored or thinks of something inappropriate. And at the end, he'll give me a rating on how well I taught that lesson, I guess. So
very cool. The height of beneficial infotainment. You know, if you can make it exactly. Interesting and informative, that's the way to go. I love it. That's good
the goal.
Stuff.
Yeah.
So people can also find you. Definitely. So I'll say it again: the Reluctant Historian. They can contact you at that handle at gmail.com, but also all over podcasting spaces. And we'll mention all this stuff again, and links will be in the description below, of course. So without further ado, I'm going to shut up, and we're going to have Liz tell us her dream, and then we're going to see if we can figure it out together. So I'm ready when you are.
Perfect. So I get just a little bit of background information. I lived in South Korea as a teacher for a year and a half in 2013. And then I also used to do volunteer work with an inner city mission here where I live in Canada right now. So that's a little background information about this dream. So I wrote it all down for you, and I'll just read what I have written.
Yeah.
So I can't remember exactly how the dream started. Like I said, I dream at least 7 dreams a night, and I remember almost all of them, but they kind of just flow into one another. So essentially what happened was I was in an underground subway in Korea. I was wearing a backpack, and I'm wandering around this subway station, and I get to this certain area. It's kind of like tucked away from the rest of the subway system. It looks like an alcove or like the top of a stairway that you would find in a high school. And when I was thinking back on it, it reminded me of the high school that I actually grew up going to. So we had these like little areas, stairwells, I guess, where people could hang out at the top. So in this alcove, there was a group of young girls set up in camping tents. And as I'm looking at these girls, I recognize that they're a group of girls that I used to mentor when I was working at that inner city mission. It's called The Bridge. They're in the tent. It's raining in this hallway alcove in the subway. And they're laughing in the tent. They're having a good time. And I recognize that we're there as part of a youth group retreat, and we're just hanging out doing our own thing. Then all of a sudden I have to leave for whatever reason, and I'm no longer in the alcove, and I'm back in the Korean subway station. But I know that I need to get back to these girls because I'm chaperoning them, but I'm not panicked. I'm not worried. I just know that I need to get back to them. So I'm trying to make my way through the Korean subway station to get back to these girls. And then I see one of my friends from The Bridge, who I know in real life. His name is Brandon. And he's with another guy who doesn't exist. I just made him up in my life, in my brain. I don't know who he is. I'm really excited to see them. I asked them for some help getting back to the girls, and so we start taking different train routes, trying to get back to that alcove area that the girls are in their tents. I'm chatting with Brandon and the made-up guy. We're having a really good time. I'm flirting with the made-up guy. We're really vibing. And then all of a sudden my girls show up, and they are dressed to the nines. They've got their hair done up, their makeup, and I'm like, what are you guys doing? Their hair's also, I guess, been dyed blue and purple. I ask where they're going. I know that they're trying to sneak out. They try to avoid answering me, but I cut them off. And I say, no, you have 20 minutes to get back to your tents. I don't tell them that there's a consequence, but I think it's implied. In my dream, I just kind of know that there's a consequence implied. So they go away, and Brandon and the made-up dude and myself are still trying to get back to these tents, and we get to the spot where the tents should be. But it's not actually, the tents aren't there, and it's a different place. It looks like a furnace room. There are metal wheels. It's steamy. And I say to Brandon, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. We pull out a map, and technically we're in the right place. But I find out that we went west instead of going east. So we're we're in the right spot, but we are just in the wrong direction. I don't know if that makes sense. In my dream, it made sense, but so I realize that we're in the wrong place. I know how to get back because I'm familiar with Korean subway trains and I know how to take them. And I say, they don't have to go with me any further. I can get back on my own. And then they just disappear. And I make it back to the right spot and the girls are back in their tents. In my dream, I was surprised because I thought that they would have stayed out, but I tell them that I'm glad that they're back. Then I text Brandon and I tell him I had a really good time hanging out with him, and I ask him to give me the random made up guy's number because I thought he was cute and I want to text him. Yeah, I told this dream to my husband, and he was like, "Of course you were dreaming about somebody else." So then all of a sudden I'm in a different space. It's a continuation of the dream. I'm in a room with a bunch of different tables that have books on them, and we are expected to read these books to different people. It's crowded. There's lots of different people in there. And then an old man is also in the room, but he brought his own book. But it's not a book. It's a flask of gin. And he's trying to drink it, but the pastor is really mad at him because he's not allowed to drink in this room. So I'm watching all this happen when the leader of the book reading decides it's time to start singing. So I look through the crowd and I see the made-up guy. He's the one that's leading the singing. And then all of a sudden I'm back in the back of the room with another one of my old friends from the inner city mission. And he says to me, "You should come back to the bridge." And I respond, "I was just thinking about that this year." And then immediately after that, I say, "I'm thinking of having a kid." And when I say this, it's implied that I'm talking about me and my real life husband. And then he smiles at me. And then I wake up. And it was a bizarre dream. And I'm really glad I wrote it down because I was like, wow, I forgot about all of these things that I wrote down.
Oh, yeah. And there's probably going to be more. Wow. Okay. So I don't know if people can see this. Just to start off with 3 full pages of me. I need a, whoa.
I was going to say, wow, you're good at taking notes.
Lots of details. Well, the good news is, like, if there were ever privacy concerns, if people could actually see what I'd written down, chicken scratch, nobody can read this but me. It's kind of my own conflated, squirrely, like half the words are not even spelled correctly. It's just enough letters that I know what it says. That is fantastic. So that's basically part 1. I just listen. I write down as many details as I can. Then I kind of use this as a bit of a map for myself to find the girls in the subway, so to speak.
There you go.
I love metaphors. That's good stuff directly related to the dream. So phase 2, deep dive. We go back as Inigo Montoya says, Vizini said, go back to the beginning. So I went back.
Perfect.
Princess Bride reference. So in the very beginning, you are in an underground subway, and you recognize it very specifically as the underground, as a style of place you have been, or a particular place you were familiar with commuting through in real life when you were there.
Yeah, so that's the weird part. It didn't look like any of the subway stations that I had been in when I was in Korea, but I just knew that this is where I was. I was in this Korean subway station. Didn't look like any of them that I had gone to when I lived there, but...
Okay, when you think about the idea that it was similar but different, does that spark any connection in your mind? What was it that stood out as not being a place that was the same? What made it different? I don't know if that means anything. Just sometimes I follow my own gut
that's
questions.
Okay. So I think what you're getting at, it looked so. There's lots of details to go into here. I teach some of my students how to write photo essays, and one of the photo essays that they look at is a subway station photo essay. And so a lot of the images that were in my dream were reminiscent of that photo essay, which are not Korean subway stations. I think it's like a New York station and like a Chicago station or something like that. So I knew that it wasn't Korea, and it was reminiscent of this photo essay that I have taught before.
Okay, so this is sort of, I don't want to explain too much because we're going to go through it, but this is how my brain works on these things. It's like, why not a direct image reference of a place you had been? Instead, what your brain focused on was, remember this photo essay, we're going to put you in this space. So there's some connection, something that idea of showing it to you in that form means something. We may never figure it out, but if you start poking your brain in those soft spots about why that representation in that space, and then when we get further down, some of those pieces come together. You're like, oh, that connects over here. Oh, and they get the light bulb. So I start making, okay, what is that mean? I make little carrots, little nuggets on the side. We'll try to come back to it unless there's not enough time, too much material. We'll see. Okay, so you're in this space, and that's like 5 minutes on just trying to talk about the space you were in. And you were wearing a backpack that was a very distinctive impression of. Do you remember anything about your clothing at all, or your person?
No, usually when I dream about myself, I never see myself. So I guess then the fact that I had a backpack on is unique in that sense, because usually I don't see myself, or I know that I'm in the dream, but I'm not like visualizing myself. It's very first person point of view, I guess. It's a first person shooter. That's what I said, first person dreamer. And this is another thing. This is where my brain goes with this. And I always try something not different necessarily, but I try different approaches to explaining what's happening as I'm doing it. Sometimes I just roll with it. Sometimes I forget. Sometimes I got verbal diarrhea and I just can't shut up. But so here's another distinction. Most dreams, no sense of yourself watching you. You're just watching yourself do the thing or observing yourself interacting with this world. In this dream, your brain said, now, not only are you in this space, think about what that means, but think about you're carrying something. You have a backpack. Rather than no awareness of yourself, your brain said very specifically, I am wearing a backpack. This means something. This put there for a reason. So just let that percolate too. That idea that that's something that stands out because it was there versus not being there. And then we start doing associations. We're going to get back around to this more, but just to prime the pump, what is a backpack? It's something that is perhaps heavy. It's a burden, maybe it weighs you down, but it's a useful container. It's a way of bringing. My first thought was you're bringing something with you, something you need to carry on this journey. And it's interesting. I mean, nowhere else is it mentioned that you took the backpack off. You handed it to someone. No one commented on it. So just for this specific moment, it said, and there's a backpack, moving on. So the fact that it disappears for the rest of the dream is also very interesting. So we may never figure that out, but that idea of I'm in this setting, I'm carrying something useful, something necessary. I'm bringing something with me to this experience. There you go. I'm going to try not to stop on every detail like that, but no worries.
But that, as I said, that kind of primes the pump and lets you know what we're actually doing here and how the process works. It feels magical. It feels magical to me, but it's actually very scientific, analytical, whatever you call it. It's very just observation oriented. Yeah.
Cool.
So do you remember the process of, because I wrote as fast as I could, but there's always a little things I make. So you're in the subway, you're wearing the backpack, you find there was a process of, say, going from the platform where the trains are to another area. Do you remember moving to the stairwell, or was it more of a jump cut? Suddenly I'm at a stairwell and I just know it's tucked away in an alcove.
So what I have written down is that I said I'm wandering around and then I get to the section. Yeah. So I'm
No, that's good. That's good. That's what I didn't write down.
That's okay.
I made a tasty sourdough grilled cheese sandwich before we got on here, and it's letting me know it's still in there.
Sounds delicious.
So I don't know if anyone does anyone care about this. I don't know. I just ramble on random things. So I like ham and cheese sandwiches with mayonnaise. If you're going to do a ham and cheese, so I dice up the ham, and this is just sliced lunch meat ham. Dice it up so that it can spread out and let the cheese melt into it. And on the outside, I put the mayonnaise and I fry it in the mayonnaise instead of butter.
Oh,
and it's really good. It has a shorter window of golden brown.
I was going to say, does it burn?
Very quickly. If you that golden brown lasts for like 5 seconds, you got to kind of be smelling it and paying attention to it. But cooking tips with Benjamin the Dream Wizard. Sorry.
It's multi-podcasts in one.
Right, for sure. And we'll get into a little history. I mean, right? So this is another thing too. You're wandering. So there's this sense of seeking, and a lot of times these things are connected. So it's you realize you're wearing a backpack, and immediately your brain says, "And you're searching."
Yes.
And you're lost wandering. And the words you choose sometimes, it's just the best way we can describe it, but they're often very indicative of what the process means to you. So wandering, you can wander, what do they say? Not all who wander are lost. Sometimes you're just taking the scenic route and you're going to see what's there. You know, you're looking for something, but you're not in a rush. You didn't make a beeline. You didn't.
Right.
And you were, there was another portion where you said you were not like panicky at all. Did you have any feelings at this moment during the wandering?
No, I was just chilling, just hanging out in the subway as one does.
So if you had to characterize the wandering, it was exploratory.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. You took the words literally right out of my mouth. I think the best way I would describe it was I was exploring what was going on down there.
That was the gut sense I got when you described it that way. Is this wandering had a purpose, an unhurried purpose, but it was purposeful. You are looking around, looking for something, and it turns out, and again, once you have that experience, everything kind of one thought flows into another. You decide, or your brain decides to show you what you're looking for as a result of committing to the search. So there's something going on there. And what your brain decided was that you needed to find this stairwell, and it reminded you of very specifically your old high school stairwell, and a very similar appearance. And this was not, say, something you would normally find in a South Korean subway.
No, not at all.
Okay.
And it was, I wouldn't say reminded me, it was exactly the stairwell. I can even tell you it was the last stairwell before you went outside the door.
Okay. Yeah. Now,
but on the second level.
Do you have any strong associations with that in terms of your high school experience? Very happy to leave the building at the end of the day? Or is that where you met your friends to walk home together? What does it mean to you?
Yeah. That was where in grade 9 and 10, me and my three best friends, there was 4 of us at total, we would often hang out in those stairwells. Not that specific one, but in the stairwells, eating lunch. You know, we were shy, we weren't the cool kids, but we were really close with one another, and not negative associations with not being a cool kid, just we just were. And then grade 11, grade 12 happened, and then we were the cool kids. And,
funny how that happens.
So, yeah.
And now we are becoming the cool kids of the internet.
Absolutely. That is my goal.
So that is another, I would say, important association, as your brain wanted to say, okay, now remember your high school experience. Now remember your young girlfriends from that time, and the feeling associated with it. And then you saw that the girls were camping in tents. And did you have any, just to kind of give me a mental image of how they were, so was this exactly that stairwell from school, and it was their tents were at the bottom, so you're standing there looking down on them? Or
no, so I all of a sudden was like in the tent with them, is how I know we were camping in the tents. So but we were still on the top level,
so they were kind of camped out at the top of the steps. Okay. And this is interesting too, because our brain does this a lot too. It'll show us what seems like a coherent sequence of events. Like you can see it like a movie playing out. You're watching the character walk and do this thing. Jump cut inside the tent.
Yeah.
Brain does that a lot, and it's usually triggered by, so we've got this sequence of searching. You find what you're looking for. Your brain decides what it's going to show you for whatever reason. Bam, jump cut. Now you're inside the tent, different scene. What was the inside like? How many? It was like one big tent and all the girls were there, or just a couple of them, but you knew there were more?
Yeah, so I could only see one girl. I don't want to name her because she is actually a human that I have worked with as a, but let's call her, what do I want to call her? Let's call her Jazzy. Why not?
Sure.
So Jazzy was there. And yeah, like the tent, it felt blue. That's the best way I can describe it. It felt like it was nighttime. I knew it was raining on us. There were other girls there. I couldn't see them, but I knew that they were there. And we were just having like a good time, just enjoying ourselves, laughing.
Do you have a specific experience of taking girls camping in the past? I mean,
yes.
So this brought back, did you think that in the dream, that this reminded you or felt familiar to specific past experience?
Not at this point. Sure. I know. Where did I write that down?
Later on, it did.
Yeah, I think after. Yes. Okay. So we're laughing. It's raining on us, and then I realized that we're there as part of a youth group retreat. So yes, I did. I guess relate it back to a time when we would used to take them in the summer. We'd take them camping, not like in actual tents. We were in cabins. So, but we would take them to like retreats twice a summer. So for a week at a time.
Okay. So it's, again, it's like, so if there's a broad story we're playing with here, this is one piece of imagery showing you, just kind of like the backpack. Okay. Be aware there's a backpack. You're bringing something with you. Now, this one is saying, okay, now we're setting the stage for the next concept under consideration of, okay, remember what it was like with the youth group things. Mm-hmm. Keep that in mind in terms of whatever you see next or whatever happens next. Okay. It's kind of, well, that's me saying it, but also I think that's the dream saying it. The dream saying this is a piece that fits here because it's relevant to the theme or the idea under consideration. Okay. And you recognize one actual person, but you knew there were more, but you didn't actually see the other ones?
Right.
Okay. Right. That might be interesting as well. So there's a lot of these little details like, why was the tent blue? What does blue mean? Why was it raining? What is that?
In a weird high school subway station.
Exactly. All these things. So that, like, I mean, every single one of these things is kind of gives little shades of nuance to the core concept, but we may never figure out why a tent, not a cabin. Why raining indoors? The hell is that? Some of these things are just so bizarre. It's like I can't connect it to anything. We might, but I never know. I want to rattle as many doorknobs as I can.
Sure. And then just one thing about that girl as well. So her name was Jazzy. Mm-hmm. In my making up her name is Jazzy. I thought it was, thinking back on the dream, it was not the girl that I mentored the most close. I have another person that I was like a big sister to, essentially, and she called me mom. And so this other girl, we had a hard time just not connecting, like we connected, but she was not, I don't want to say favorite, but she was not my favorite one.
Gotcha. That is actually very important, and you just saved me from glossing over something very important. I usually try to ask exactly that question. That's why this is a partnership. I couldn't do this on my own. I'm kind of like I don't know. I keep trying to think of metaphors for what I do, but it's just in broad strokes. It's partnership. The more you bring to it, the more I can help us both get out of it. So it's definitely not me. I'm just the kind of the conduit, so to speak. I think that's important that now the dream is showing you. It says, okay, think of these youth groups. Think of this specific girl from that experience that you had a hard time connecting with, and probably at that time you're looking at it as a challenge, number one, and not to put words in your mouth, but let's see if I can conceptualize it myself, is like you care, but it's hard to care because she doesn't make it easy, and your typical or go-to strategies are not firing on all cylinders the way you'd hope they would, or the things you know how to do are not getting through, and it's presenting you this challenge on a double level of like, I have to really prove I care because this person's difficult and it's hard to get through. It's challenging my skills. So all of that in this one image in your dream saying, okay, now that you get that broad concept expressed by one image of one person, then you move into the next phase of whatever it was. Okay. And it was almost immediately after that boom, you're back in the subway? Or did something else happen before that? Did some interaction happen in the tent?
Just the laughing and joking around happened inside the tent. We were having a great time.
It was this person that reminded you of someone it was difficult to connect with, but in the dream, in this instance, you have succeeded. Now you're laughing with them. You've made a connection. You're sharing a positive emotional experience. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we were doing. Wonderful. Which is why I thought it was weird, because in the dream, I would have expected it to be this other girl that I was very close with. Yeah. So I was like, why was it Jazzy and not Bob?
Oh yeah. And if we put that in the context of the difficulty in connection, now the dream is showing you, remember this person you had a hard time connecting with, you have succeeded. You've overcome the difficulties. Now keep that successful experience as a result of determination or whatever it was that worked. Imagine being in that state of mind, and then that triggers the next thing. Now you're wandering in the subway again. Boom, another scene cut.
Yeah, another scene cut. So what I wrote down is I knew I had to leave for some reason. I don't know what the reason was. My brain didn't tell me. But then I'm back in the subway station, and I need to get back to these girls because I've realized that I'm chaperoning them. I'm looking after them. I'm responsible for them. I don't know why I left. I just peaced out.
Yeah.
And I need to find the girls, but I'm not freaking out. I'm not worried. I'm not stressed out. I just know that I'm responsible for them. I should get back to them.
Okay. And that is kind of interesting as well, because we've got why leave? Why did your brain say, okay, now imagine you're not there anymore. You've gone for an unknown reason. There's something separated you from this experience. Now we can look at that as eventually in life we move on from things we've done.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't do the youth camps anymore, or at least you know that at some point they stop. The girls go home. You go back to doing something. Even if you're going to do it again next year, there's always a beginning and an ending to these encapsulated experiences.
Right.
But your brain is saying, I need to get back to the place I'm responsible for. I need to get back to what I was doing. Maybe if we relate it to that idea of what happened just before was imagine you've overcome a difficulty and made a successful connection. Okay, now look at yourself separated from that and this desire to get back. Maybe that's what it is. Maybe there's something going on with you. Like, I want to recapture that experience. I want to move my life back in that direction where I'm doing that kind of thing more often. Something like that. And this all depends.
Okay,
If you feel it right here, it's real. If I'm just whistling in the dark and it's not connecting, then please tell me.
Well, I think when I think of it just as the youth group people, I was like, well, I'm not really desperate to get back to them, but I am desperate to get back to my teenagers. So I've been teaching online since the pandemic, and I don't have any personal interaction. And I love teenagers. I think they're great. And I miss them so much. So it could be that. It could be just me being like, and like she's this jazzy girl. She's a teenager in the dream, right? So maybe that's it. Maybe I'm just
sometimes specific people stand in for broader categories of people because they represent, say, an essence of what that kind of thing is, or what you appreciate about it, or how you understand it. Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, if that is literally the connection your mind just made of, oh, I miss my kids, I want to get back in the classroom, that could be absolutely nailing it on the head. I try not to put a big check mark in those boxes during this deep dive portion. But but at least that's another thing to let percolate, to say, what if? Well, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see if it connects with other things in the rest of the dream. It probably, I'm gonna think it probably will. You're back in the subways. You're trying to get back, and do you have specific specific visual representation of where you appeared in this scene change? Were you back, say, were you in a subway car traveling? Were you standing on a platform waiting for one to arrive? Where were you physically?
So I think I'm going to use the word like labyrinth. Subway systems, especially when they're major subway systems like in Seoul, they are like labyrinths. You have to go on all these little side quests, I guess, to get to wherever you're ending up. So I was just in the center of some sort of random tunnel to get. The other interesting thing, as we've been talking about this, it was all underground. I didn't, some subway stations can be above ground and you'll go, but we didn't do any of the above ground. We were completely underground the entire time.
That is interesting too. And that may form a broader theme for the dream too, is because underground brings up a lot of different things. It can be, what do you find underground? Animals burrow underground. Vegetables grow in the ground. Gold is found in the ground. Things that are underground might be considered hidden. They might be considered. The first thing that came to my mind was subconscious, possibly. I don't want to. Let's say not putting a big check mark in that box, but maybe it's showing you something that's not at the surface yet, not ready to be seen, or something that showing you maybe what's underneath some other motivations that you're experiencing, something like that. So
yeah. And interesting, as I'm again just thinking about it, the alcove that we were in, as I said, was on the second level of my high school. So when I'm in that tent, I'm on the second level, but when I'm in the subway, I'm underground for whatever reason.
Yeah. Interesting. Maybe your brain's making that kind of a connection to what's bringing what's underneath out into this area that is more exposed. Not exposed. Exposed sounds bad. Visible, known, making it known, that kind of thing. Yeah, that's my brain. I live in such an abstract headspace that it's actually hard for me to be concrete sometimes.
All good.
Metaphorical. Yeah.
I was gonna say I teach English, so go metaphors.
Oh, please, yeah, right. So you're in this kind of labyrinth, and that's interesting to describe it that way too. Now, it's partly because it's an actual representative. Okay, so your brain sometimes says, well, this is what these places are like, so go with that, because your brain's not being lazy, but it's like, this works. Go, it'll pull an easy reference. It may be more significant with that too, is that you're in a labyrinth, considering the urgency to fulfill responsibility. So the labyrinth suggests a complicated space to navigate. It's not straightforward. You're gonna have to find your way. It's not gonna be handed to you. It's and it's not going to be easy. So there's something about that, just that conceptualization. When did you realize you were with other people? Did that happen at a specific point? When you appeared there, they were already with you?
No, they were coming to me. We just kind of like bumped into each other in the subway station. The man, Brandon, and the made up man, who didn't have a name in the dream, were walking towards me, and I was like, oh, hey, like, good to see you. And
okay. And the sequence of events, I think, is also very important too, because it was something about needing to appreciate where you were in the process that led your mind to saying, what if someone was here to help me? What if I had some company? What if I had a partner? What if I had not a guide, but what if I wasn't alone in trying to figure this out? And so your brain supplies two people. Like, hey, you're not alone. Yeah. Maybe this is a better way to go about it, is in partnership. I love those things. And it's interesting that they weren't there. It was the realization of where you were and the mission you wanted to accomplish, that moving back towards that responsibility gave you companions, but compatriots. What's the word I'm looking for in terms of like people to help you on your way?
Comrades.
Sure. Yeah, that's the general idea. Sometimes I get hung up on finding the specific word, because every word's got its own nuance. Of course.
That's okay. As I talk with you about it, I feel very Hobbit-esque. I don't like The Hobbit. I've tried to read the book a couple times. I've never read it, but as we're talking about this, I'm like, man, I just feel like I'm a Hobbit with like Bilbo, and the dudes are coming with me for whatever. We're just on an adventure.
I'm going on an adventure. That's the first thing I thought. This is the fascinating thing about dreams too. We get to go on these bizarre fantasy adventures every night in dreams. Now, unless you're like me, and I don't remember any of them.
I remember all of them.
I wish. It's such a fascinating thing. It's like, I've never had to my knowledge, a lucid dream. I've never had I've talked to people who've had prophetic dreams. Like they say, swear to God, up and down, I dreamed it. 2 days later, that happened. And I'm like,
that's wild.
That's wild. I don't know what to do with that. As rational and scientific as I am, I'm way open to psychic phenomenon, ghosts, the hell if I know. I don't have any proof for those things. Not enough for me, but I don't know. But yeah, no, this epic adventure thing is fantastic.
Here we go.
Did you notice anything about them specifically? Now, you noticed one was definitely a friend from your past.
Yes.
Any visual impression of both of them, just generally, or just the knowledge they were there and who they were?
Yeah, like no visual impression. I just remember, I have it written down that I was just happy to see them. I was excited to see them. And the one guy, I'm flirting with him, and we're like really getting along very well. But nothing visually.
Fair enough.
That stood
They weren't
out.
dressed neither one of them had a backpack, that kind of thing.
No. They're just, the one that I knew was dressed how I would normally see him, just like his normal clothes.
Sure.
And then the other guy, I don't remember what he was wearing.
Yeah. Fair enough. Any strong associations with this friend Brandon from the past? I mean, what was your relationship with him like? What might he represent in the dream?
We were really good friends. I had a little bit of a crush on him. Sorry, I just hit my mic. I had a little bit of a crush on him for like a month, and that was it. So
okay. Any context to that? Like where were you engaged in a project together? Was he a coworker or a fellow mentor? Were you learning something from him? What's going on with
so
that?
we would have been teammates. So the way that the youth group worked is you would have like your leaders. So I would have been a leader. Brandon was a leader. And we would be in charge of like guiding these young inner city youth through life, through what it's like to be a teenager.
Fair enough. Did you have moments of, say, looking up to him or aspiring to adopt some of his specific qualities? Or did you admire the way he was able to connect with, say, difficult kids?
Like in real life?
Yeah.
No, not really. I think the time in my life when we were close, like that whole group of people, there was about 7 or 8 of us. We were basically like family. Like we spent a lot of time together. These kids struggle with a lot of trauma, neglect and abuse in their life. So, we would see really hard things. And this group of people, of which Brandon was one, we would be able to talk about those things, be like, man, like this is hard. So I didn't really like look up to him, but he was definitely a very important person in my life at that time period.
Someone you could rely on, a true fellow participant in this process, equally dedicated. Yeah. So there's something going on there. And what I mean by that is, why did your brain show you him and not someone else?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. That's what we're here to try and find out. But that's where my like, why this guy? So I'm thinking, what is in this context? What is the benefit of this guy showing up to deal with the labyrinth and moving you towards this fulfilling this feeling of responsibility? Mm-hmm. He was part of your team, so we got that context. You say you have a bit of a crush on him. Now, it's kind of interesting that there's this second unnamed guy. And the first thing, just as you were speaking a moment ago, the first thing that came to my mind is now you have separated your crush feelings from your happy memories of this person. So it's almost like one person, but it's represented as 2 people in your dream. And the flirtation is someone else. It's like, this isn't Brandon. This isn't how I think of Brandon now, but you're remembering maybe this flirtation, this possibility, the potential of a relationship, of a romantic nature, but you've kind of maybe, if this makes sense to you, split.
No, I was going to say, this feels right.
Split that off. That feels right. Him. Yeah. Okay. Good deal. Yeah. And it could have been, so, and it's interesting because it wasn't another, what made me think that it's an unidentified other. It's a second person who is traveling with him in this context, but it's not him, and he never gets a name. He never gets his own personality. It's just this sub. Anyway, you've already said you think it resonates, so I won't dwell on it too much. But and so you've kind of that idea of separating off the flirtatious or potential romantic side of things off into a secondary personality in a way, and it says in my notes that you asked them for help getting back. Like that was an experience you remembered. You had to express that to them in order to get their assistance. Maybe I wrote it down wrong.
I don't think I asked for assistance, but I don't know why they would have been helping me otherwise. Well, maybe, I don't know.
Dreams are like that sometimes, where it's like, and they showed up to help me. No reason. They were just there, and that's what they were doing. And that's what your brain wanted to show you at that moment. Yeah. Yeah,
and I didn't. So I haven't written it down. Like when I had this dream, it was like 6 a.m. I woke up, rolled over, typed it all up so that I wouldn't forget. I didn't write
Anyone
it down.
Listening, if you're going to remember your dreams like this, immediately before they've faded, you go have breakfast, you go kiss the kids, good day, and send them off to school, and then you go back and try and write your dream down. It's gone. You got to get it right away. So small piece of advice.
But so I didn't write down that I asked for help. So I guess maybe it must have just been implied. Like, and he was very helpful because I remember we pulled out a map and we're both looking at this map trying to like one of those like big traveling maps, but that happened later.
Well, yeah, that was going to be my next question is, so they're getting the visual sequence of events down in my mind. You realize you're in the labyrinth, you're maybe walking around a little bit, bam, the guys are there, they're there to help you. Then where did you go with them? What was the kind of physical sequence of, then we went here, then we did this?
So I can't remember if it would have happened at this point. So there's a sequence of us walking through the tunnels. We're on a train car at one point, but I don't know when this happens. But what I have written is that, so I'm hanging out with the guys, I'm flirting with this random made-up guy, and then we run into the girls, and they have colored their hair blue and purple, and they're wearing a ton of makeup, and I can tell that they're planning to go out for the night or whatever.
So the interaction with this second unnamed person, the flirtation, that it seems like that kind of took place in the journey, in the travels of seeking them, which is interesting. It's like, why that during this process? Right. The thought that comes to my mind, you can see if it resonates with you, is that there's a part of you, even while you're angling towards leaning into, determined to find or satisfy this responsibility angle of things, you are still there with your own needs, your needs for emotional connection and romantic relationships. So maybe it appeared to say, this is still a part of you that needs expression, even while you're in the, you can't lose yourself completely in a grand mission philosophically, because you are still a person in this process with your own needs. Maybe something, I don't know.
So I would honestly say like that, I think, is a really good description of who I was when I was working with this youth group. Like, I was absolutely like, okay, yeah, I'm helping these kids, I'm mentoring these kids, but I also have needs, and like I'm looking for a husband. Sure. So, like, yeah. But that was my past, right? Like, I don't feel like I'm that person anymore. So, for sure, but I agree with that.
That's very good. That's very good for you to be able to just kind of encapsulate that and say, yeah, at that time, whatever this dream is showing me is a slice of that period of time, including who I was, including the path I took to discover who I was and what I wanted and how I was going to fit it in with my life mission in general. I think, that's great. And then it was something about that. And it's interesting that this is all happening on a journey within a journey. You're seeking to fulfill this, getting back to the girls. And in that process, it's showing you what you went through back at that time. And is this during that process that the map came out, or was that actually later, another instance of needing the map?
So the map happened after I ran into the girls.
Okay, then we'll get to that in order. Yeah. So do you remember where you were when you met the girls? Like how you encountered them? Did you turn a corner suddenly? They were all there?
I do. Yeah. We were waiting for the train to open up, and this actually, as I'm talking about it and kind of remembering it, I have experienced this in Korea. You know, you're getting ready to go out for a night, and you're with your friends. It's crowded. The doors open up, and then the girls came out, and I was like, okay, so where are you guys going? What are you doing? Why do you look like this?
You were on the train, and the doors opened down.
No. We were on the outside of the train.
You were waiting for the train, and they were on the train, so they were on their own journey, so to speak, and suddenly they appear in front of you. Interesting. And they come out.
So doors open, they come out. And
they come out, and you said they were dressed to the nines. Like, so in the tents, you had the imagined understanding that they were dressed down, relaxed, comfortable. Now they're looking for their own adventure, night on the town. They're putting themselves on display in some way.
Yeah, and they're sneaking out. I have that written down. I know that they're trying to sneak out, but I caught them because they got off the train right in front of me.
Right, busted. Did you have any of those similar experiences with kids? Not exactly necessarily, but what are we dealing with? A theme here of, you've got these girls that maybe want to experience life. That's normal. They are maybe trying to act a little older than they should, because it might get him into trouble. You know, you put on too much makeup, you look over 18 if you're not. When you think of it from that angle, I'll stop talking. What comes to mind with that scene?
I mean, like, they were all like, exactly. They've been always trying to be, and I wouldn't even say trying to. They were adults before they were adults, right? Again, we're going to kind of come back to they had to grow up way faster. Yeah. So they were always trying to do things. When I first met Jazzy, she was 14, and I've known her until she was 19. So, you know, she was 14 going on 21 when I first met her. So it was definitely like, this isn't a surprise or anything that they're trying to sneak out. I was like, oh yeah, like you guys are always getting into some sort of trouble.
For sure. Yeah. But then the dream shows it to you. It says, in this process of bringing yourself to this place where you can look at this responsibility, and the process of leaning into it, of seeking to become, like in the context of the dream, get back to embodying this responsibility or enacting it. You've come across now misbehavior in a way. There's something you have to, you're actually having to exercise that responsibility in a way where you're like, this isn't going to be fun for either one of us. I don't want to have to tell you to knock it off, but this can't happen. I'm going to have to, now you're setting a boundary with them. You're seeing the very visual representation of someone doing something completely natural. You can't fault them. And yet I got to put my foot down because this is not good for you. So there's something going on in that representation. That's just what came to mind. I wish I could connect it to something else, but maybe, and you told me you set that boundary. You said you got 20 minutes to get back to the tents. I wrote that down almost verbatim. And how did they respond to you? Did they roll their eyes but obey, or were they like actually scared of you? Like, oh shit. Or were they like, okay, mom, you know, you're right. Yeah.
It was more that just like, oh, all right, fine. Like, we'll go. We're not happy about this, but off we go. Begrudgingly, they went back to their tents.
Fair enough. And that is important.
And I didn't give them a consequence. I just said, you have 20 minutes to get back to your tents or else or whatever. And they were like, okay.
It's interesting too. So your brain is showing you that not only can you do it when it's necessary for the right reasons, but the people you're responsible for are going to trust you or respect your authority enough to follow through even if they don't want to. And you're also going to be fair and reasonable about it and say, you know, no one's getting a whooping, but I'm not going to let this happen. And just knock it off. And they did. And they did. They followed through, and they didn't fight you. They didn't run away. I mean, your brain's not showing you these different alternative endings to that part of the story. And where did you see them go? How did they leave? Did they scurry off down a corridor? Did you have a hard scene cut in your mind?
I think they're just gone. It's like they're just no longer in the dream anymore. And I don't think they come back.
And then the next thing I remember is you're looking for them. You're like, wait a minute, I found them. But now I need to find the tents. Now I need to find the physical location. And that's what you're saying when that's kind of in this next sequence is where do you remember being still on that platform in front of the open door at the beginning of this next sequence, or where did your mind put you for the next phase? Are you back in the labyrinth, so to speak?
I can't honestly remember, but I'm and this could have been also the moving sequence where we were just vibing again, you know, me and Brandon and the random dude. But I do remember there is a new scene that happened that we do end up back where the spot is. So it must have been like let's just call it like a montage of moving around the subway.
Fair enough, yeah.
And then we get to the spot, but it's not the spot.
And that is interesting too. It's like, what is it that made you know it was the spot, and how did you know? But it looks like it, but it's not. What might have clued you in on that?
Oh, so the room, it wasn't that alcove anymore. It was. Have you seen Grey's Anatomy?
Pieces, mostly not. I won't lie.
Okay, so there's a scene where these two characters, they're having an affair in this boiler room, and that's what this room looked like. It had like a boiler in it. There were like a metal like hamster wheel, not a hamster wheel, but that's the best thing I can describe it as. Like, I don't know what they're actually called, like a windmill, sawmill, sort of mill sort of situation. It looks like a It's kind of steamy. There's 2 levels to it. And it's where I'm supposed to be. But then I'm like, this isn't where I'm supposed to be. This is the right spot, but it's not the right spot. And that's when we pull out the map to be like, how did we end up here? Like I guess we went the right direction, but we didn't end up where we were supposed to be because we're obviously not in this alcove. We're in this weird furnace room.
Yeah, that's interesting too. So there's a sequence of events, this visual and experiential representation of seeking a specific place, going where you thought it would be, following the path you believe would take you where you're supposed to be. You get where you think you're supposed to be, and it's not. It's somewhere else. So that may be metaphorical of other things of like we're just following the wrong path in life in general. It takes you to some place. And it's interesting too that it's this representation. So you're kind of flirting with the guy, and you end up in this place that reminds you of this Grey's Anatomy place where they had the affair. And you're like, probably your brain is, I mean, just throwing it out there, your brain is saying, don't go here. That's not actually what you're looking for. Don't follow this path to this place. You thought that's what you wanted. And again, if we're looking in the past, this may be you reflecting on these experiences saying, I'm glad I didn't end up at a place I wasn't supposed to be. Something like that.
Yeah.
It's all
because I was not supposed to be in Korea, so
right.
It was very, very clear.
and that's when you pull out the map. And so this is perhaps your brain saying, let's get yourself reoriented. What are you really looking for? Where are you really supposed to be going? So you're having that moment of reassessment of like, where do I really want to go, and how do I get there? Let's reference some useful tool to literally point me in the right direction.
Right. Yeah.
And then you became more, and then there was a sense of then greater confidence. Now that you've done this, let's check the map. Let's reassess. Let's put some brain power into deciding where I want to go and why. And you had this more confidence. Okay, now I know where I'm going. And then at that point you said the 2 guys gone. That was the end of the need for the representation of those people as companions on the quest, as representing this time of your life where there were personal and professional goals as you were finding out who you were and what you wanted. And then that act of checking the map, letting go of Brandon and his perhaps other half, you find the girls, you find that professional responsibility or purpose.
I do.
And I can't read what I wrote then. But then you reach out and contact them again. And ask for the man's number. Like, well, maybe I'm not ready to let that go. You made this decision, but maybe part of you is still kind of trying to keep the possibility in the background. Maybe I don't have to let that go completely. And you know what you didn't in your real life is you found a life partner. You found love, you got married, and so you probably realized that I'm doing a whole lot of just babbling analysis here, but that you don't have to let that go. You do need to prioritize. You do need to get where you're going first, maybe in the sense of superordinate priorities coming first, but you're not going to sacrifice yourself completely to this. You're not going to sublimate all of your desire for a husband, a life partner, a romantic relationship purely to pursue this quest of mentoring kids. As fulfilling as that is, that's not all there is to life. You're laughing. Is it? What is it? I should let you talk for a minute. Tell me what you're thinking.
No, I love it. I think that makes so much sense. Like I've always wanted to be a teacher. I love hanging out with teenagers. That is very much what I've always wanted to do. So I'm just like, yeah, this makes sense to me. Like I have to keep my romance with my husband or whatever, and not get stuck on just teenagers.
It's true.
I like it.
Yeah. I mean, this is as much as I love dream interviews and I love my editing and I love being left alone, I got to get out of this chair, out from behind this microphone once in a while, do something else. I got to go do some yard work, water the plants, paint a fence, it's something else that, spend time with my wife. There's things that are also important and too much hyper focus on one thing and you lose the benefits of, doing other things in a physical sense, but the emotional and spiritual and intellectual benefits of broadening your mind to those other areas. Then the dream does another jump cut.
Yeah.
So it's like it's taking you through this whole sequence of events that are walking through some of your past life and decisions. Now it's showing you something else. Now you're in a different space, you said, but still subway, still underground.
No. So now, like, I think it was kind of like, it was a church, but not the worshiping area of a church. Like, you know how churches have, I guess, like, I don't know what to call them.
A back room, classroom,
lounge areas.
Lounge, sure.
Yeah, like a lounge area. So, like where you would have a coffee, or if there was something happening not on a Sunday, where you would just hang out and talk to people. I don't know. Yeah. So that's where we were. We were in a space like that, which makes sense, right? Like, I've been dreaming about this youth group that I worked with for a long time, and we had a church that we went to, and it wasn't the same space as the church that I went to, but that sort of vibe, like we're in the lounge area where the church people would be. And
you had this impression that you were there specifically. The purpose was to read books to other people. So this sound. Go ahead.
And I have kids. Maybe I think it might have been kids. I couldn't clarify that, but I wrote down we're there to read books to people, and I think maybe kids. We're reading books to kids.
Sure. Any idea of the purpose? The content, any of that come
no
awareness? Okay.
No, and I don't even like kids. I like teenagers.
Fair enough. I know.
So creepy when I say that.
No, I
like teenagers.
Yeah, exactly. So that is so sometimes the lack of something is as important too. So it's not like I am here to read to them so that X happens. It's more like what your dream is showing you is I am here to perform the act of reading to these other people. So there's something in that act itself which means something to you. And what you discover is that, I mean, did you have an impression of the room being full of kids, or you were there but the kids had not arrived?
So it was full of big people. I'm assuming they were adults. It was full of tables as well. Okay. And then on the tables were books, like standing up, not how you would put them into a bookshelf, but you would have other books to support them. These books were just standing on their own. So, and in a organized sort of fashion, the tables were plastic fold out tables. So we just, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the books were on it, and you were just supposed to like go to that table with that book and read, I guess, to whoever showed up.
Yeah. It's interesting that, you can imagine, say, tables piled with books, you'd think maybe laid on their side and stacked up, but these were arranged like library shelves, like,
yes.
but it's and it's interesting too. It's like a church, quasi-spiritual, whatever setting, but not the preachy part of church, the social gathering part of church.
Yeah.
There's a library.
That's important.
Right? Yeah, no, it is. And there's a library, I don't want to say low rent, but the idea of like, it's not the grand oak shelves, large, you're in a library. This is a library.
Yeah.
This is information. This is books, it's words, it's reading. It's you said you had an English degree or something?
Yeah, I teach English and history.
There you go. Yeah, and where do you get English and history? You get it out of books, or that's where we put it to keep it safe for the other people, so they can. And so but it's on these. Yeah, and the idea of low rent, it's not the derogatory nature of it, but it's like it's informal. It's but there's a lot of them. And you are there to, and so this is where you are in your life currently, is you're this person who's engaged in the social aspect in some ways of sharing book information, reading from books to people to give them that information. It's very much related to your current teaching career, I think.
It is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But then suddenly there's an old man there and he's got a book, but that book is not full of information. It's full of alcohol. That is interesting. What do you make of that? If I just like throw it over to you, when you think of it that way?
Honestly, that was the part where I was like, what is going on? I do not understand, because it was a book to start with, and then I looked at it closer and it was actually a flask of gin. So he was like, I guess, trying to sneak around the tables to maybe put the book there, the flask book, gin, whatever.
You get the feeling he was trying to hide it amongst the other books?
But not to like trick a kid or anything into drinking it. He wanted to drink it, but he was sneaking it in, right? So I did get the impression that he was trying to put it on the table to replace a book. for his own purposes, not for the kid.
Yeah. Do you remember anything about the guy? I mean, was he
Yeah, he was like older, like probably 60s. He was like thin. He was wearing khaki pants and like a brown belt. And I think I was like, am I thinking? No, he had like a plaid shirt tucked in to that. And then I remember distinctly like the round, almost like John Lennon glasses.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, so when
you kind of get that complete image back fresh in your memory, does it make you think of anyone or an iconic representation of a type of person?
Like, it just kind of makes me think of like the stereotypical old dude at church, I guess, but with a flask of gin. I don't know.
Yeah, and if we look at it in a even a say non-judgmental way, you've got someone who's not there for the purpose. It's like he doesn't fit, and he's not playing the same game. He's playing his own game while trying to blend in. And it's not, it doesn't seem malicious about it, but he's just like, because like some people show up and they're there to do the thing. And then there's other people that show up with ulterior motives, and ulterior motives are not necessarily malicious. Like some people just go to church because they like the community. Some people are there because they want to hear the sermon and they're trying to learn the Bible verses. Two different things, equally valid as long as they're not disruptive. Sure, come and hang out for whatever reason you want to. But what he was doing,
except the pastor was mad at him.
Oh, so he did. Yeah, he did get busted. It's like
he did. Yeah,
you're not here. Like there's some part of your dream is saying, some part of your consciousness is putting this pastor to there, just again to like you busted the girls to say, you're not doing this right. This is not what we're here to do. There's something out of place in that setting. And then there was some sudden transition where you were in the back of the room.
Yeah, so the pastor got really mad at him and was like, hey, you're not supposed to be drinking in here. So I'm watching this all play out from a table close to him. So then when the pastor gets mad at him, he decides it's also time to start singing for worship. And then, so I'm watching it through the crowd, and then all of a sudden I'm at the back of the room. I'm no longer beside the guy with the flask of gin. I'm at the back. Okay. And the person leading the singing, the worship is the made-up dude that from the first part of the dream.
Okay.
But Brandon is not there anymore. It's just the made-up guy.
Just the made-up guy. That's interesting, too. So there's a there's some a trigger in the dream where busting this guy, like you become aware of it, your dream generates the pastor to call him out on it. That triggers, you're in the back and they're singing. And it's the flirtatious, separated off part of the Brandon guy, that memory of that experience that is leading. What were they singing?
I think they were just singing worship songs. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been, it could have been anything. Yeah, but, or you don't have a clear idea of what it was. It's just.
I felt like it was worship songs, but I couldn't hear what it was.
Fair enough. Yeah. And I tell people that as well, is that seeing something, having a visual description of something is exactly the same as knowing something in your dreams. Right. They are equivalent experiences because it's all literally imaginary. So if you just know you're 70 feet tall precisely to the inch, that is the same as seeing a tape measure in the dream that goes up 70 feet. Oh, and it's next to my head. So I could tell. You just know things equally real. Was there a reaction from the people in the room? Was there a choir singing with him, or he's just leading it and people in the room are singing?
Yeah, we still had the tables, we still had the books, people are looking at him. I don't know if anybody was joining in or not, but yeah, he was just singing and everybody was watching him, and I was at the back of the room with a different person from my past.
And did we get into who that was? The other person from your past?
No, so I didn't. Well, I did say his name is Ryan. And he used to, when I was working with this youth group, he was the person in charge of it. He's no longer doing that role, but at the time that I knew him, that was his role. And so we're both kind of just hanging out in the back, and I'm super pumped to see him, and he's super pumped to see me. And that's when he says, "You should come back to the bridge." That's the name of the youth group that I worked with.
Okay.
And I responded, "You know what? I was thinking about that this year," which is not true. I was not thinking about that. I don't want to go back to the bridge.
Like in your
I don't know why my dream said that. Yeah. It was a great time. Loved it. Miss what I had, but it's not where I want to or should be right now.
Yeah. So definitely you don't want to go back there, but there's a representation in your dream of someone from your past, from that environment, calling you back, inviting you back. And so it seems like there's a part of yourself who is, or that is reminiscing fondly, at the very least, on that, and wishing to recapture some of it. And then your waking life, it's like the difference between of your druthers and your practical application of stuff. You know, if I had it my way, I would get that back without all the other baggage. But you got to take you got to take it lump sum. So I'm waking life decision, not going to do that. But your dream life still says, I miss that. Part of me misses that and enjoys that experience, and wouldn't want to go back, but doesn't want to give it up either. There's something in there. And this was the guy you were then talking to about having kids with your husband? Yeah.
So immediately after I said I'm thinking about coming back, or I was thinking about it, immediately after I say I'm thinking of having a kid. So like no pause, no nothing. I'm just like, I think I'm coming back. I'm thinking of having a kid, which is a legit thing that me and my husband are talking about.
That's what the next thing I was going to ask you too, is that probably if that dream is anywhere related to the idea of this whole dream could be related to the discussions with your husband about having a kid and you thinking about the future, everything you've been through with troubled kids, this whole process, you're separating responsibilities from romantic personal satisfaction, navigating your path, finding the proper map, avoiding going into the wrong places. Go ahead. You're having a moment.
Okay, so like all of that journey, like we're going through a journey right now. Like, yeah, absolutely. This sounds like dreams are cool.
They really are. Yeah. And it's the mystery is in identifying these relationships to your real life. Is like, why these specific images? What the hell is that related to? And sometimes if you can put it together like this and you can say, there's a core question, problem you're trying to process, and then your brain goes back to experience and conceptualizations and starts telling you start telling yourself a story about what you're thinking and trying to say, well, if I look at it this way, what does that tell me? How do I understand this element of it? So yeah, I mean, this kind of entire personal history review is going to go into a major life decision of, am I ready to have a kid? Can I do this? Can I fit it in? Is this something I want that's good for me? Can I be good for the kid? Can I fit it in with my teaching? And my husband's going to be involved. All of this is starting to really sing. I
thought I was just dreaming about subway stations. Like, come on.
And this has been a theme, you said. Now we can talk about that aspect of it too, of like, how long have you been having kind of a recurrent theme? Is it just subway stations, South Korea?
No, about Korea. I'm always, I have that. But there's one thing I do want to touch on before we go to that. The last thing about the dream. So throughout the whole dream, right, I'm single, I'm flirting with this side personality person. But when I tell my friend Ryan that I'm thinking of having a kid, that's when I remember I have a husband and he's real and it's going to happen. And then I wake up.
Yeah, for sure. And it was automatic in the dream. There was never a moment in the dream where you're like, oh, I'm going to have a kid with him. Oh, no, wait, I have a husband. It was like, I'm going to have a kid, and it's implied. It's automatic. It's known. That's who it's going to be with. There was never any question about it. So it's always nice to have those waking choices reaffirmed by your subconscious.
So good.
For sure. Yeah. And then putting all this together, which we never... usually this is the point where I go, okay, now we've been through the deep dive. What does it mean? We've been doing that all the way along. We've put everything, I think we put everything together as we walked through it. I'm not always able to do that. This is kind of amazing.
Good.
I know. No. And you've been a fantastic partner too, because sometimes, no offense to anyone, not everyone is as in touch with making their own immediate connections, and sometimes we got to get to the very end and go back, and sometimes we can do it as we go, and it's hit or miss, and it's nobody's fault. Some things are closer to the surface, some things are not, and the connections aren't always easy to make. But my original point was, now that we've kind of looked at this the way we did, if you relate it to a sequence of similar dreams, How do you think those line up in the theme, so to speak?
Yeah, so that's the part that I'm most intrigued about is the Korea part of this dream, because it'll often just be like the setting of the dream. It's big in the fact that I know, and I'm like, I'm in Korea, I'm back here again, but the dream is never the same. It's always something different. Like I literally just had another dream. So I had this dream maybe I think on Thursday night, and then 2 nights ago I had another dream where my mother and my sister and I were in Korea, and we're trying to get out, and I don't know, it's like, why am I dreaming about Korea again? Like where? And so it's never the same dream. It's never anything similar happening, but I'm in Korea and I'm back. I'm like, why am I back here?
You said you spent like a year and a half there, a full 18 months. Yeah. And that was something about the way you said it made me think that it was a difficult experience or a very intense one.
Like I think I alluded to the fact that I should not have been there.
What did it mean to should not be there? Yeah,
we were talking about the youth group being a good experience. Korea was not a good experience. Like I'm a teacher. They do not do teaching in Korea. It's a business rather than actual teaching for the child. I had a very horrible relationship with a man there. So the friends that I made there, my times partying there were fabulous, but the majority of my life there, I was like, why do I keep dreaming about this? Because this was not a good experience.
Yeah.
It helped me become who I am for sure, but like if I could not go back there, I probably wouldn't.
Yeah, and if we look at dreams conceptually from the subconscious processing of life experiences, which I mean, there's reasons that's true, and there's different ways to look at it. It seems like maybe as I was saying kind of off camera about reoccurring dreams, is that there's something you haven't processed it completely, understand it fully. Like what is it where people, why do we get fixated on certain anxieties, is because we haven't figured out how to protect ourselves from that same danger again. Not in a way that satisfies our ability to feel confident that we're out of danger. So there may be something from this experience that you're like, your brain's still trying to wrap your head around, how do I make sure what I went through does not happen again? Because that was thoroughly unpleasant. This is not how I want to teach. This is not the environment I want to be in. It's not the relationships I want to have. As much good as there was to it, there was just really strongly negative elements. You're like very much focused on future self-protection is kind of the way I would describe it. Is that kind of making sense? Is that as to why they might come back?
Yeah. No, that does make sense.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fair enough. Well, thanks for coming. No, what I would say
solved
is,
it.
Right. And in terms, just in broad strokes, like I think someone made a comment on a video recently saying, hey, if you would just tell us how to interpret dreams, we'd get more benefit out of your channel. Like, you're watching it happen. This is just what it is. But the good news is you can do this for yourself. And I walk people through this process, holding your hand, basically hold my own hand, trying to get myself through it. To go from, okay, write down the dream. Now go through it again and fill in the gaps. So it's like a writing an essay. You get the outline, then you fill in your arguments, then you kind of reorganize it to try and make sense. Now the dreams are chronological, but they relate anyway. But by the end of it, you've gone through that outline to rough draft to finished product. And you can do this with your own dreams. It's a little dicey. I don't want to tell people it's as good as having someone else to bounce ideas off of, because you can't generate all of these ideas on your own.
Right.
You can, but it's not easy. So sometimes just sitting down, you like talking about dreams with your mom. You got a best friend who's also fascinated. You can bounce ideas off each other, but you can do this. So for each, my rambling, advice as much as it's not advice, but let's say you get another dream about Korea. You write it down and you go through the same process and you're like, what do I need to understand about that experience? And what does my dream tell me? Not about an answer so much as what are my questions? What are the identified elements that seem important to me? And then once you've got that basic structure of here's what my brain was trying to show me, and you analyze it, it's like holding an idea in your head without accepting it. You analyze it as, okay, this is what happened. This is what I was thinking for a moment. Now, what do I think about that? What do I do with that information? And it might help you to find specific elements of your experience where you believe you could have made a different choice and going forward can make a different choice, and that will walk you around that bad experience and not put you back in the same negative place. And I would bet, maybe $5. I would bet that if you do that about some of these dreams, you would actually find yourself coming to some decisions that you can physically implement in your life, perspectives, ways of understanding situations and those incidents of negative traumatic career dreams decrease. I bet you.
Well, and I think breaking it down and asking the questions that what you're saying makes sense. Because if I often just think about it, well, I got out, so why am I still dreaming about this? Which is a big thing rather than breaking it down to the smaller parts of what were some of those decisions that I made and how could I have done it differently rather than just don't go to Korea, right? Like that's not going to solve that problem.
Yeah, it is. No, and that's what a lot of people do too, is we take those situations where it's like, you'll have men and women. He was like, I'm going to swear off relationships. Men are toxic. Women are bitches. Yes, you had a bad experience. Yes, there are complications with relationships. Yes, there are specific negative things you went through with that person. Now, what were they? How do you make sure you don't get into that toxic relationship again? But it goes for all kinds of different stuff. The places you lived, work experiences you've had. I'm rambling again. I had a point to all of that.
You brought up something that I was actually just thinking about, right? Yeah. Like, so I'm thinking to myself, why did I go to Korea? That was a split-second decision, right? Like, I was like, no, I'm going. This is what we're doing. Didn't think about the pros and the cons or anything. So if we're going to take that in relation to the dream that I'm having about children and maybe having a children and how does that fit into my life, if Korea was a split-second decision, maybe I'm not supposed to just be like, make a split-second decision about having a kid, or maybe there's some tie-in with that, right? Like, why would Korea be there? So,
yeah. And in a very real sense, like your brain is saying, remember when you looked without leaped without looking. Anyway, strike that, reverse it, Willy Wonka. So your brain's going to say, make sure you think this one through. It's tough with the kids. I decided never to have any. For my own reasons as a whole, I'll do an episode on that someday. Sure. Personal decision. Yeah. And honestly, nobody should be a parent if they don't want to. That's probably a recipe for disaster. But there's also, there's two ways of it. You want to be prepared. And I've heard people say you never feel prepared. You never have enough money saved. You never have enough time in the day. And then you have a kid and it just works. You just do it. It just happens. Yes and no. There's a tension between those two things of don't overthink it. You'll talk yourself out of it, and don't jump into it without due consideration, because you can screw up two lives, yours and the kids and your husband's, your family's, who knows? Yeah. So these are all, that's a good, no matter what decisions you come to, that's a good reason to be concerned, to think it through, and to even dream about it and say, let's this is important enough. I'm going to process it unconsciously. Don't Korea the child. That should be the name of this episode. Don't Korea the baby.
Exactly.
I don't know what I'm going to title. I never know what I'm going to title these things. I always.
Well, there you go.
Maybe I will. I don't want to. Here's what I do. I'll spend 2, 3, 4 hours coming up with a title, because the one of the recent ones I did is it's Latin. It's liturgia non refrenare. Now, how did I get there? Well, the guy had an experience where he's on a Bohemian Grove island, and there's a secret ritual, and there's all these creepy people, and what we got down to is, what's a liturgy? It's the recitation, sometimes musical, of dogma or tenets of a particular faith, and in Latin, non refrenare does not restrain. So for him, the cultural liturgy of going through specific steps of, here's what you do, this is how you live your life, step 1, step 2, go to college, get a job, marry, children, that liturgy did not inspire him. And so that's where the title comes from, is like the liturgy does not restrain. So that's where I get my Latin title sometimes.
Love it.
It always has to be specific to the dream. So I will give this due consideration as well. By now people will already know the title, and we'll see what it is. Maybe I can find don't Korea the baby, and I'll put it in Korean. That'll be an interesting
You're like, what does this say? But
we've been going for almost an hour and a half. If you have more questions, I'm always down to hang in, or we can wrap it up. I mean, if you feel like we've gotten a satisfying understanding for the moment, it all depends on you.
Yeah. No, I think I honestly, like I said, I have lots of dreams, but this one did feel, because it was a Korea dream, felt important. And so I think this actually made a lot of sense to what's going on in my life right now. And like, actually, my husband and I didn't want kids for the longest time. And so it is a big decision now. So if this is a changing of our mind, so maybe that's part of the journey as well, or the being stuck in a labyrinth. I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of stuff that came out through this conversation that I hadn't thought about as being important.
Good.
I feel good.
What is it makes me feel the best in life is someone is better off because they had an interaction with me. Someone has a new way of looking at the world. They've gotten something useful they can make benefit of that. I'm getting a little verklempt. I don't want to cry on camera, but that's really meaningful to me, and I appreciate that. That's why, God's honest truth. That's why I do this. If I couldn't have a positive benefit, I would I'd do something else where I could.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I'm going to have to get my husband to listen to this with me and be like, so what do you think?
Right on. And I'll get it up as soon as I can. I'm on a bit of
no worries.
I'm on a bit of a hiatus right now because I haven't had dreamers to talk to. It comes and goes. I just, as they say, God closes a door. I open my own damn window. I just do something else. Right. Sometimes you got to do it, or knock down a wall, expand your space. So hopefully within the next couple of weeks, I'll be able to get it up, and I hope you do. I hope this is beneficial to everyone that watches it. You and your husband get something out of it together. Yeah. So, that's good.
It was good.
Well, enough patting myself on the back.
Yeah, you did a great job.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that. And I never know how to end these things. So I will just say once again, thank you to our friend Liz Lawson of The Reluctant Historian. And of course, her husband, Dakota, who gets many, many shout outs during this as well as being the entertaining one. The Ed McMahon to her Johnny Carson. And of course, on Instagram at The Reluctant Historian, and the Reluctant Historian at gmail.com if you want to get in touch with them. All over podcasting services, iTunes, Spotify, etc. And well, that's it. I'll just say to everybody, hey, thanks for watching another episode of Dreamscapes. Hey, bye. I've got some books for sale. I've got a coffee mug, t-shirt, all that good stuff. You can pop on by BenjaminTheDreamWizard.com and see what else I got there for you. Downloadable podcasts of the shows. You can take me on the go while you go to the gym, work in the garden, that kind of stuff. So I'll just say, hey, thanks for listening.